Hey guys, I'm Matt and today we're gonna talk about how to make an abstract loop animation in Blender. So if you're interested, let's dive in. And before we start, like the other project, you can find a file for free. Oh my god, bro. Hope you like it. Select the default cube and add a new geometry node. The first node we need is a volume cube. Then add a noise texture. Use 40 because we need the W parameter, then duplicate it. Like the previous video, abstract loop animation, we're going to loop the noise with using 4 value and 5 math node. The first value is frame counter, and for value we use hashtag frame, and what it does is actually use the frame number as a value. So if I change the timeline, as you can see, the number inside the value change with it. The second value is speed, and I use a fixed number like 0.008 for it. You can test the other numbers. The third one is loop frame, and we use the middle of the frame range for the value. So if we have 250 frame, the value must be 125. And the last one is a scale, and I add 0.7 in it. The first math node is a multiply and connected directly to the W of first noise. And the second one is a modulo and connected to the first socket of multiply and connect the speed to the second socket of multiply. Connect frame counter to the first socket of modulo, and for second one connect the loop frame. Select the multiply and duplicate it and connect it to the W of second noise. Add another math node and put it on subtract, connect it to the first socket of multiply, and for subtract first socket goes to a modulo and the second one goes to a loop frame. Connect directly the scale value to the scale of both noise. And the last math node is a divide. Connect modulo to the first socket and a loop frame to the second socket. Then add a mix node, put it on color, connect the noise texture to A and B, and connect the divide to factor. Use the mix node for density of volume cube. For increasing the contrast, we can use a color ramp node. Set the position of blackness on 0.5. The last node that we need in geometry node is a volume to mesh. If we go to the end of the frame range and press play, as you can see, there's no jump. For making contour, the first step is add a plane and then add 2 subdivision surfaces. The first one is 6 on viewport and also 6 on render. But the second one is 2 on viewport and render. We need to copy it on z-axis, so I'd add an array modifier, put it on constant offset instead of relative offset. For Z offset, I use 0.12 and put the count on 17. Before we go further, I want to explain the method we are using. We want to, of course, you can probably guess that we want to subtract the mesh we made in geometry node from the plane that we just made. But the boolean is not the right way because you can use boolean for animation. Boolean is not that much accurate. So we use another method, which is dynamic paint. First we find the intersection part and put the result in a vertex group, and then by using a mask modifier delete those parts. So go to object data properties and make vertex group and leave it empty. To be more organized, I'll name it mask. Then select the planes, go to physics tab, put the type on canvas And after that, hit Add Canvas. Select the cube, hit M, and make a new collection, call it Brush. Make a dynamic paint. For type, choose Brush and hit Add Brush. Select the plane, which is our canvas. On Surface tab, make sure you check the surface type on weight. Add the collection on Brush collection. Check the dissolve and use 1 for time. If you didn't save the file, you wouldn't be able to bake the cache. So make sure that you saved the file. Before we start the baking, go to Output tab and select the empty vertex group that we made. So all the data from baking dynamic paint will go in there. It may take a couple of minutes, and after that you can go to weight paint mode and see the result. So let's get back to Modifier tab, add a mask modifier and select the vertex group for masking. For making planes thicker, add a solidify modifier, and for thickness, insert 0.06. To prevent this effect, we have to do a couple of things. The first one is add a smooth modifier. Put the factor on 1 and for repeat use 4. Select the smooth modifier and move it above the solidify. Select the first subdivision surface we add and apply it. Then go to mask modifier and turn on the smooth and turn off the subdivision for viewport, and it's gone. The simplest part of this project is making the environment. I'll add a plane for the base and then make a camera. Hit Ctrl-Alt-0 to bring the camera view to your current view in viewport. By adjusting the rotation and location of camera, I put the subject in the center of the frame. Select the camera and go to camera setting. Set the focal length on 60 so the scene look more isometric. Then add another plane under the subject, scale it on y-axis and a little on x-axis. Use solidify modifier to make it thicker and bevel modifier to round the edges, and then in right click menu use auto smooth. For the timber shape part, I don't know what I should call it, I use another plane. Make it thin and tall by using a scale, and again use a solidify modifier for make it thicker and bevel modifier for rounding the edges, and then again hit the right click and set the shade on auto smooth. To make a couple of copy of it, I used the array modifier and check the result from the camera view to make sure it looked good. I make the donut by a circle, put the vertices on 64 and then go to edit mode, select the edges and extrude them, and then select the faces and extrude them in z-axis, and again use the bevel for make the corner round. Hit Shift D and duplicate it, scale it down to make offset. Go to edit mode and select the inner faces, scale them to offset it from inside. Before start lighting, put the render engine on cycle, use shader editor in bottom window, go to world setting, and for the environment lighting I use a sky texture. Uncheck the sun disk and increase the altitude because it adds a slightly bluish color to the environment, and decrease the intensity on 0.3, and then go back to 3D viewport to create the sun separately and start rotating it to have more shadow on the right side of the render. In the light setting, put the angle on 10 to have soft shadows. For adding the extra shadow to the scene, I'll make a separate plane mesh, rotate it 90 degrees on x-axis to be vertical, and then bring it out from the render view and scale it up to have more shadows and adjust a little bit sun direction on z-axis. Scale up again the plane until the shadow cover the render area. For shadow plane material, I'll use a noise texture and connect it to a color ramp to have more control on the whiteness and darkness of noise texture, and then connect the color ramp to the alpha to make disappear some part of the plane. We can have partly shadow areas and start playing around with the color ramp and scale of noise texture until you find a good result. There is no absolute number that I tell you use that number to have the best result. Set the base color on black. At the end of the video, I'll explain why we use black color. It's a kind of trick. For the big base plane, I'll make a new material and then add a Voronoi texture and color ramp to create the circle shape pattern. Connect the Voronoi to color ramp and color ramp to the base color of material. Select the Voronoi texture and put it on 2D and smooth F1. Turn off the random parameter. Hit Ctrl T to add mapping node. In color ramp, put it on constant and move the white color to the left to have smaller circles. You can adjust the scale in mapping node. After that, I find out I can delete the mapping node and adjust the scale by using scale parameter in noise texture, and the result is the same. Select the black color in color ramp and set a cyanish kind of color, low saturation. I don't want to use high saturation color for the circles. I don't want to use eye-catching color for them. For the timber shape boxes, make a new material. Set the base color on low saturated blue because we want to turn on the transmission. If we use high saturated color, the color would be unpleasant. Turn down the roughness about 0.07. Use 1 for transmission, and for transmission roughness put it on 0.62. For the main object, I'll make a new material. For base color, I use also a desaturated green color. Put the roughness about 0.2 and turn on the transmission, put it on 1 like the other material. Use 0.1 for emission strength and use the base color for emission color. And let's make another material, which is the glass BSDF. Use the green color that we made for principal BSDF as a color of the glass and put the roughness about 0.1. To mix these two shaders, use a mix shader node. For factor amount, I'll add a Fresnel node, connect it to the factor, and use 1.05 for IOR amount. To understanding why I add emission to the glass is if I connect the glass directly to the surface, as you can see, glass become darker. But using emission in glass material make it a little bit lighter. The other way is to go to render setting. In light path, max bounces, put the glossy and transmission on 20. But if I increase the number so high, it can increase the render time so much. For adding more light to the scene, I'll select the sun and increase the strength on 20. For the big donut, I'll use a glass BSDF material like the others, but set the roughness on 1. and IR on 1.3. For the small donut, I'll use a desaturated yellow color, drag and drop it on the emission color, and then add a Fresnel mode and put it on 0.89 and connect it directly to the emission strength. Put the transmission on 1 and add a color ramp between the Fresnel and emission strength. The trick to increase the contrast in render is to make a box. For the base color, use a black color, and for metallic and specular, use 0. Make a copy of it and position them in scene like this. Just be careful that they shouldn't be seen in the render. And if I zoom on the shadows and turn the base color on white, as you can see, the shadows are lighter. And if I turn it to black, the shadows become darker. And this is the black box effect. And this is the result. I just slept 4 hours in the last 48 hours. That's a normal life after the artist. I know. I caught cold again, and I think the medication are affecting. I'm making nonsense.